Good morning. I am going to share with you what I'm eating today on a low carb lifestyle. Low carb, in my opinion, means 100 grams of carbs or less per day. And so far, all I've had is some black coffee. And I'm getting hungry for breakfast. So let me show you what I'm going to heat up. This is some cabbage and sausage, sort of like dressing, if you will. Basically, all it is shredded cabbage, some ground sausage that I actually season up myself, and then some eggs. I think I put green bell pepper in this. So I'm going to heat this up. There is no dairy in this. It's very basic, truly just straight up grocery store ingredients, and it's going to be delightful. The last thing I'm going to add to this is just a little bit of sriracha for some lovely heat. Sriracha and Cholula are two of my favorite hot sauces. They add a ton of flavor without changing your macros much. I have no clue what the macros are on this, but I know it's pure deliciousness. So I'm going to eat this, drink my coffee, and move on with my life. It's time for some lunch. I have a Sloppy Joe pocket. Basically, this is my homemade Sloppy Joe recipe that I put inside an egg bread. And then I topped it off with some cheese. This is a Colby Jack cheese. The essential thing you need to know here is you just make your egg bread batter, and then there are 12.5 mesh bun pans that you can buy on the internet, and you just fill up the bottom of each well with some of the egg bread batter. Let that bake a little bit, add on whatever you want to fill inside of it, and then top the filling with more egg bread batter, that's hard to say. And then you let it bake, and then at the end I added a little bit of cheese. I reheated this in the air fryer, which is why it is so toasty. And then I have a salad here, and you say, oh my goodness, that thing has apples on it. What? But I'm currently doing low carb, less than 100 grams of carbs. So let me tell you what I've got here. It is some of this organic spring mix. And then I added in one very small Granny Smith apple. It looks like a lot because it's completely cut apart. And then I topped it off with some honey mustard dressing. And to make that, I used some of the G. Hughes sugar-free dipping sauce. Yes, I know this has seed oils. Yes, I know that those are the devil. And I used a little bit of it. I put, I would say about half of this mixture, maybe 2/3 of this mixture is the honey mustard dipping sauce. And then I added about 1/3 over of just plain water, and then a tiny little splash of apple cider vinegar, shook it up nice and well so that would thin out that dipping sauce. And then I drizzled, a tablespoon, maybe a tablespoon and a half onto my little salad situation here. And then I'm also adding in a pure LaCroix. I love unflavored sparkling water. It's afternoon. I am hungry for a snack, and I think it's because I have not had a sufficient volume of protein yet today. So I've got myself a little yogurt bowl here. I home make my yogurt. I do use the Fairlife branded milk. And on this one, I did go with the 2% milk so that it was slightly lower in fat. Then I took some ground up chia seeds. I keep these in the fridge, and I only grind a little bit at a time in order to add some really good fiber to my yogurt that mixes in really nicely. I also added in some of the Marigold Foods collagen peptides in the horchata flavor. This right now is amazing for fall because it is a lovely warm cinnamon flavor, which is delightful. I love their collagen. And then I also added in a little bit of the Nutrail nut granola, just a small little amount to add in a tiny bit of texture. I don't even think that's 1/3 of a cup right there, which is a serving. That might be a 1/4 cup. But I, obviously sprinkled it out. So anyway, I'm going to have this little snack, and that should definitely bring me all the way to dinner. We are currently at the dance and gymnastics studio / gym, and the gymnast and the dancer are both actively in class right now. The other kid, she is working on some independent work, so I'm gonna seize this moment where I don't have to be trekking back and forth between a couple of different locations. I'm gonna go take myself a little walk. There's a nice walking path just that way, I don't know, 1/8 of a mile, so I'm gonna seize the moment. The awesome thing about this path is you could go for miles in either direction and never get bored. I realized when, after I went on a walk, and when I got back from my walk, I realized I hadn't really provided much in the way of context about me adding in a Granny Smith apple. Okay, so a couple things. I am adding in some whole food carbs, and I'm still maintaining a low carb diet, a low carb lifestyle. I'm trying to keep it at or below 100 grams of carbs. I'm trying to keep my protein high, and I'm trying to help my thyroid understand that we are not in a panic state. I've done some information gathering like a little squirrel. I have not done research. I've not sat here and dug through 1,000 white paper studies. And I also want to say that I am a woman. I am not a small man, which means that any studies out there, if they are done only on men, they would not really apply to me and my hormones. Like, sure, there could be correlations, but we can't really like definitively say the things are the same, because the way that men's hormones function is very different from the way that women's hormones function. I also am not a doctor, a healthcare practitioner, nothing in the medical industry whatsoever. All of this information is just little bits of information that I've gathered for myself to try to better understand what my body is doing so that I can support my body to be as healthy as possible. Couple things first. Our bodies can function off of ketones and glucose. Ketones are considered a clean energy source, and they are great energy. They perform beautifully for me. And then you've got glucose. Glucose requires insulin to get into the cells. Now, here's the thing. Insulin is triggered, like a small insulin response is triggered anytime you put something into your mouth. It could be a very tiny insulin response, or it could be a very big insulin response, depending on what input you give your body. So if you're drinking water, your body's going to say, well, it's not going to say anything, but your body is going to act on that water much less than it would act on a jelly-filled donut. So if you eat a high-fat, low-carb food, your body is going to pump out a little tiny bit of insulin and then realize that there's no need for that insulin and then stop to pump out that insulin. So how does that apply to your thyroid? Well, the insulin, which is a hormone, will communicate to T4 that it needs to convert into T3 so that it can be used elsewhere in the body. That's one of those things where some people, their bodies might stimulate enough insulin when they eat food to be able to satisfactorily convert enough T4 into enough regular T3, free T3, not reverse T3, that the body can then use, and there's no stress response. But I have some pretty significant stress responses as indicated by a variety of different blood markers that I've got going on. And so I need to bolus the glucose or fructose or carbs in order to signal my body to produce more insulin so that there are insulin hormones there to tell the T4, convert over to T3, please. So that's why I'm adding in whole food carb sources and some fiber sources into my diet, more so than I have in the past. And I'm going to see what that does. I do not have definitive answers as to whether or not this will work or will not work. Based on the bit of information gathering I have done, I do think it will be beneficial. And I hope that I can look objectively at the food sources and at the numbers and make a more informed decision about that, like 6 months down the road. So all of this is just one big experiment. Here is my dinner plate. I have some beef heart that my husband grilled a few nights ago that I'm having left over. And look at how it's so beautiful. It's got pink in the center still, even after reheating. And then I've got some air fried Brussels sprouts and some sweet potato fries that I hand cut out of a very small sweet potato. And I seasoned that with my Redmond real salt, favorite salt. I wanted to talk a little bit about these carbs. Because I am showing you my food today, I weighed my sweet potato and my apple. I wouldn't do that on a normal day, but I kind of thought that was a little interesting tidbit of information. I also don't regularly track a ton of my macros. I'm just always mindful, am I eating plenty of protein, and what does my typical carb situation look like? And it's usually a guesstimate. Anyway, so between the tiny little sweet potato, which was like 116 grams, and the apple that was less than 150 grams, I'm sitting at around 60 grams of carbs with those two items, which is well below my 100 grams. Now, obviously, my Brussels sprouts have a couple grams of carbs in them. The cabbage that I had in my breakfast this morning, you know, like the little bit of the Nutrail nut granola stuff that I had, like these things all have small amounts of carbs in them, but the sweet potato and the apple have the large majority. And I'm gonna come in under my 100 grams of carbs for the day, which is a thumbs up for me. I am trying very diligently to get my thyroid into a much better state of being. So, you know, if this is the path right now, it's a pretty tasty path for me to have to go down. Okay, last thing I'm gonna have for tonight is some hot chocolate, and I'm gonna use the Marigold Collagen Peptides in hot cocoa to do that. It's got some really good stuff in here. It's dairy-free, it's got no gluten, which I gotta avoid. It's actually low FODMAP. If you're familiar with FODMAPs, those cause some gut problems. And it's also got some L-glutamine, which helps with your gut health in general. Like it helps to support those things. And it's just a delicious way to end off the night. I do like to make sure that I am done with all food consumption, everything, done with everything except water by a couple few hours before I go to bed. That way I've got plenty of digestion already happening and my body can focus on the rest and repair situation. So I've got 1 serving in there. I'm gonna pop 12 ounces of hot water in there. Hot chocolate ready for consumption. Still a little too hot. When you use a milk frother, it does get nice and frothy on top, so that's fun. And I don't find that I need to add any like milk or cream or like almond milk. I don't have to add anything to it to make it feel like a nice, rich, hot chocolate experience. You can do those things. You can, but I don't find that it's necessary for me. And this has what, like 20 grams of collagen protein in it. Not a complete protein, but the collagen does a lot of other stuff with bone and joint support, the gut support, all that stuff. So anyway, I'm gonna go drink this. I think that's gonna do it. I'll see you in my next video.